It started with a flicker of doubt. That night in the station, as rain painted blurred streaks on the window beside him, the man sat rigid in the hardback chair, his eyes hollow though dry. The detective, Fowler, couldn't name why he found the man's confessions so odd. Maybe it was the methodical way the details poured out, just slightly off, as though the narrative belonged to someone else. The crimes themselves spanned years: 3 children missing, a husband vanished, neighbors lost. In the parade of words, he never flinched, yet something faltered in each account. Wrong weather, misdirected street names, timelines that barely fit. Fowler, whose job threaded through truth's grey fog, had heard false confessions before, but this was different. The man's tone held neither bravado nor defeat. It felt rehearsed, as if each sentence was a hollow shell of guilt, the sound of someone trying on a suit that didn't fit. Yet when pressed for proof, objects, locations, even a threat, he could only offer what was already in the file. The station's fluorescent lights hummed uneasily over their heads. Hours passed. Fowler's voice cracked, frustration leaking out in sighs. Why say these things? Whose story have you borrowed? The man pressed his palms together, as if in prayer, staring past the detective at nothing. Sometimes I remember things that never happened, he whispered, barely audible under the storm outside. Fowler shifted, unease slicing through him. When permitted a phone call, the man dialed a number, then hung up at the first ring, mouth knotting in a silent apology to the air. They released him after 2 days. It was procedure, with no evidence and discrepancies in every detail. They could not justify holding him. Fowler watched the figure drift down the courthouse steps, melting into the low-hanging fog. Weeks crawled by, slower than the drizzle of November. Fowler could not shake the feeling. He dreamed of the man's unblinking eyes, his hands pressed in that silent plea, until one night, an old case file tumbled from an overstacked shelf. One of the deaths the man had confessed to, now officially unsolved. He lifted the brittle photos. A detail surfaced in his mind. A crimson thread wound around the victim's wrist, not public knowledge. In the interview, the man had mentioned a crimson ribbon, placed there to keep the soul from wandering. Fowler searched for more. Another case, another misplaced detail. Each one the man had slipped quietly into his story. Obscure facts, unknown to anyone but those who had stood in those rooms, breathed the air of violence left behind. He was called in to testify then. Re-examining footage, something else became clear. In every moment, the man never looked at Fowler. He looked at the one-way mirror, a faint smile hovering on his lips, as if something was on the other side, promising forgiveness. The police retraced the man's route since his release. Doors kicked open in empty houses he'd visited revealed rooms arranged with ritualistic care. Crimson ribbons, half-burned candles, missing person flyers stacked neatly like prayer cards. Each victim's trace led to him. Fowler sat alone in that interview room, the air thick with the echo of confessions, and for the first time, he wondered if the man had really meant to confess at all. If instead he'd been confessing to some unseen audience. Because the next day, a package arrived for Fowler at his apartment. It was wrapped in brown paper, a crimson thread tied in a bow. Inside was a recording of the interview, but with one difference: the man's voice was gone, replaced by whispers that came from behind Fowler, speaking his name, promising that soon he too would remember things that never happened, and realize that in his own way, he'd always been part of the story.